Hello, I'm Jonathan, also known as the Medieval Genie. We're going to do a live stream. Let's get the soundtrack started. There we are, see if that wakes up enough people. But once people start joining, it's really quite simple. I'll get into some of the blacksmithing stuff. No, that should be enough. Hello! Of course there will be blacksmithing. So, let's get straight to it. So we have got footage, at least it should do. Yep, it's all still here. Knowing my luck, it would have disappeared. So we're going to look at stuff that I've been blacksmithing, basically. Such as this. 160, right. So, this is starting off as a file, or rasp, or similar item, which we'll get to see it forming up. Oh, and the earthquake effect is because I think that I tried to make sure the stand of the camera wasn't next to the stand that I improvised, but I guess not enough so. Oh, and I cut out all the bits where I was just leaving it in the forge to get hot, because that would be really boring watching a part of me, my legs, in front of a hot thing that you can't even see. As you can see here, it's starting to forge out the tang. That's interesting because I actually started with what would look like way too short a handle. I know that when you draw out the material from experience, it will end up stretching quite a bit. In fact, it actually still ended up a bit too long. And of course, this being tool steel of a file, it's even harder to work. Plus, it's interesting because there's the hammer you can see on the side there, and see if I can get text information. So, where's Restream? There it is. And I can see what you guys are saying. Oh yeah, reckon 100 iron daggers. Yeah, I've been trying to do it like that. Problem is, just like in Skyrim, doing that is expensive. Very expensive. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I think this is the password. Way! It has worked. Let's go back a bit. So yeah, unfortunately, H.E.M.A didn't get to make the toasting fork. Well, not toasting fork. What am I saying? The fire poker. Yeah, I tried to make sure it was narrower, just a bit narrower around where the shoulder is. But yeah, I've had it, like I said, I was having it narrower around the shoulder, so it can actually, you know, and then fatter around the base, where you'd have the pommel, so it could be a bit better fitting in the hand. I found that design works well. And later on, you'll see, and there, I just put my glove out there, which is so I could measure up the handle against my hand. Because some people just make it too short, or usually just way too long. And, oh yeah, thanks. The anvil I got was from anvils.co.uk. It's a London pattern anvil, so it's got a hardy hole, Pritchell hole on the back. Obviously got a step on the front and a horn on the front. Because you get certain farriers anvils and things with 2 horns. You get certain things with the hardy and Pritchell holes somewhere else, and yeah. But you can see it's like a classic stereotypical anvil, but it's really useful because it's got pretty much everything. The only thing I complain about is that the horn is very deceptive because it's got more curvature on the bottom than on the top, which throws me off sometimes, and I've made some bad curls because of that. You know, seeing it from the bottom, or you know, from the side, and thinking it's a certain amount of curve, whereas on the top it's it's much more gradually curled. Now you'll see with the handle, starting with it kind of fairly straightish, I've done a bit of a curl in the bottom, but to make it fit in the hand better, I've got it curling forwards a little bit as well. You'll see it a bit more pronounced later on. And I'm also trying to stretch out the material and straighten it. At the moment using the lighter hammer, which is somewhat, well, obviously it's lighter and it doesn't have as much an impact, which on that sort of tool steel is less effective. And you see in this scene I've switched back to the larger hammer, which is a bit too heavy for me, but I'm hoping I'll get into it. Now at this point I'm trying to forge in a point. Stretching out the material, getting a point forwards. Like I said, I can't remember if I said it or not, but this blade unfortunately cracked during the heat treatment process, so unfortunately we won't get to see it actually being used. But I tried it before it was tempered, and it was looking like... Oh yes, I'll definitely craft a sword in the future. This was my first attempt at doing some sort of shortish sword, longish knife type of thing. I mean, this ended up becoming... I was looking at maybe a bowie or hunting knife or something, see what I could stretch out, but it ended up becoming like a sort of early medieval period sax. And you can really see that type of point here. It curls, you know, it becomes more curved later on, but in this early stage, you can actually see sort of what do you call it? Get sort of, well, yeah, straight back, which just triangulates, whereas later on it ends up becoming more of a curved backing. Excuse me. If we skip further forwards, we'll see it coming out much more. So there, it's got the sort of straightish backing. Let's move on to the next one. So here you can actually see it's starting to do this weird sort of C shape. It's almost like it's that Egyptian sort of sickle type of sword. I mean, comparable to an H.E.M.A sword would be certain, what are those weird sort of war sword things? Or executioner swords, ones with, you know, flat tops. Those would be fairly good. But putting a point on the back without being an amateur and welding it on would be quite difficult. But yeah, like I was saying, there's this sort of C shape starting to come out, and I realise it later on. If I do get into making swords, I'd certainly be happy to experiment with things like the H.E.M.A sword, or, you know, various swords, including all those sorts of exotic swords as well. Heck, if I get good enough at pattern welding, I'd be willing to look into some sort of, you know, katana, wakizashi, all sorts of things that I wouldn't normally do. And you can see in this scene, I'm hammering on the sort of shoulder so I could try to get that C shape out of the sort of tang. You can see it's mostly straightened out. Because I put it around towards the back of the curve around here, and that meant it actually gradually curved, including the back, whereas what I really wanted was something more pronounced, which I'll put on here. Also, hello, Deleted Kingdoms. Yes, the footage isn't live. That was, like you said, that was during broad daylight. But all of the commentary, any questions, answers, all the usual things are live. I don't have a webcam, so you can't see my face gesturing at the camera, but still, you've got this to look at. I could indeed make throwing knives. They'd be far easier, especially with the all-in-one handle design. Then it'd be... In fact, you can see one that I made into a finished... Ah, yes. You can see I'm quenching the tongs a few times because they get quite hot. Which, I mean, they don't soften or do anything too much. The main problem is they get way too hot to handle because the heat travels all the way up the handles. Genie checking the straightness. I didn't learn to quench the tongs. It was a situation of feeling them, and through my gloves they were getting too hot, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put them in the water. It's also interesting because one of the things I learnt is, well, the sorts of things I should be using to quench swords and other items is actually oil. But in terms of how quickly it quenches, and how aggressive it gets for hardness, it goes in order of cold water, hot water, cold oil, and then hot oil. Which is interesting because by putting the tongs in the water in advance, that was actually what I tried, and I quenched this when unfortunately it still ended up making a crack right here next to the handle. I was actually putting the tongs into the water deliberately beyond, you know, making them cool enough for me to, you know, keep holding them. I actually was deliberately getting them hot. Oh yeah, we'll get to see the product at the end. Although, like I say, the quench made it crack and it's fallen to pieces, the actual shape of the knife, before getting a handle and all that, you can fully see. The only part I didn't have in the video is the fact that I drilled 2 holes in there and tried to heat treat it. The actual full shape of the knife you'll see in the last clip. Just check which one it is. So we've got... Just trying to see where it is. Here it is. Okay, so 60 to 158. Okay, so if we skip ahead, this is where I'm back onto the tang again. I'm also trying to forge this part out, noticing it's getting a bit iffy because the bit around here is fully forged out. Look at Blacksmiths and Skyrim and analyse what they're doing. I mean, if you ignore the glitches, they're just kind of hitting a bar of steel. Nothing I criticise. They're doing it really slowly, like they've got all day. Also, they quench it a lot. If you had something you were making a sword out of, that's actually really bad. Because if you quench the material, it can end up, especially on water as well, it can be prone to making cracks. I mean, that's what happened to mine in the end, and that was just doing it once. You can imagine if you repeatedly quench it in water, every single time you risk a crack happening, and it's just going to go really badly. You could end up with stress fractures, and you'd end up with cracks that might not even be so visible at the beginning, and then they get more and more exaggerated as you forge the material out, and it becomes irreparable. So here we can see it's still got that slight C shape in the tang. By there I'm straightening it out. But here it is. Okay, so here's the finished product. Or will be. Yeah, so there I straighten it back out on the tang because I wasn't happy with it. And I've then, I think it was back here? Yeah, Blacksmithing and Kingdom Come Deliverance was pretty good, you're right. Now here we are. Yeah, you can see me straighten it back out. Of course, tries to twist, things like that. Right, there we are. So now I've made it fairly straight, like before. I think a little knobbly bit there which I hammer out. But here, That's when the important stuff happens. So this time, rather than giving it a gradual curl and hitting it from the middle, I actually focus it just over the edge. Here I'm trying to get that knobbly bit out. Basic supplies one needs for forging blades. 1. Source of heat, you know, a forge, which would be a coal forge or gas-powered forge like I've got. Anything like that. Secondly, some sort of anvil. If you could try. How small does the blade have to be where you don't have to do any heat treatments? Not applicable, basically. Heat treatment is there so it can hold an edge and also have spring to it. Yes, you don't need to worry about the springiness. Oh yeah, cool. That's a long time ago. I think he'd look admirably on how far I've gotten, or possibly wish it was slightly faster progress, but still. But yeah, in terms of heat treatments, the blades always need to be heat treated. That's, in fact, I could have, if I... No, I've actually gone back to the beginning. Okay, so we look at right here. That's the blade. So you can see, if I move this window for a minute, over this side. Here, you can see it's got the point. Of course, it grinds that part in. Actually, I think I'd do a bit more forging later on. But you've still got the same sort of curl in the back, fairly straight, and you've got this shoulder. I ground that in to be more exaggerated, so it went about here. And then it was a sudden rather than gradual shoulder on there. Straight backed, that curled rather than, or curved rather than straight taper to the point. And then I ground an edge in. But yeah, I mean, I could have done it without doing the quenching. The problem is, what you get is a knife that doesn't hold an edge. In fact, even when I was sharpening it, just to test it out and see what it feels like, it was rolling on the edges, and it wouldn't stay sharp, it wouldn't cut properly. It had sharpness to it, and you could slice something, but it's not nearly as effective as a properly heat-treated blade. And that's why, really, you should be doing the heat treatment on any length. It's just that it's easier because, firstly, to get a consistent temper, you've got a shorter length to do it across, so there's less margin for, well, there's less, less chance of something going wrong or inconsistent. And secondly, you don't have to worry about... Oh yeah, I could make a bollock dagger at some point. Hello. I'm glad you like my videos. Josh, don't sound familiar. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes. When you're doing a shorter blade, you can give it a very hard temper, because you don't have to worry about it, having to flex so much. So a short knife, you can give it a really hard heat treat, as long as it isn't absolutely glass brittle. Then it'll take an edge and it'll hold an edge for a long time. Whereas with a sword, you have to get it more towards in the Rockwell range. You have to get it in the 50 to 55-ish range. Higher than that, it starts to become too brittle because it needs that spring. Since, when it impacts, there's all this length that needs to wobble along. Now, if we close this video, we've also got a couple more things. I've got a couple of minutes, so... Here, for a couple of minutes. This is starting off as some chisel. So it's got a mushroomed end, it's something that's being used, it's just an ordinary chisel, basically. But then, I'm going to make it into a hardy tool. Now, to those who don't know what hardy tools and hardy holes are, if you look on the right, towards the back of the anvil, there's a square hole. You basically put tools in there, which allows you to do different things. Like, for example, I've got this horn here. Maybe I'd want something that's smaller, you know, I need something that's an even smaller diameter than this, excuse me, tip of the horn. Or something more specific. Maybe I want a rod that's not, you know, tapering like a cone shape, but just a consistent length rod for, you know, forming tool, basically. So you can make curls of varying types. So I could have something like that that almost looks like a miniature anvil, with a rod coming out one side and a spike coming out the other, and it slots in a hole with a square peg. And this will form a cutting tool in the square peg, you know, with a square peg. And that's what I'm doing there. You don't see me do much or anything with the chisel head because I'm satisfied of it. But what I'm doing is getting it, well, putting it in the forge for a long time. Luckily I cut those parts out, or there wouldn't be much footage for you to watch of me forging. Yes, I do wear goggles because I'm using power tools sometimes. It's good to just keep them on all the time. And also you'll see they've got forge scale and things flying around. It's bad enough when it hits my, you know, my arm or something exposed and it stings a bit. If that went into my eye, I'd probably go blind. So, I mean, it's extremely unlikely, but I'm not taking any chances. I drop things a lot. You can see me angrily grab it on that time. Just... But yes, I keep forging it out, and eventually I make a taper, and once I start to see the taper, I test it in the hardy hole. There you are, you can see the hardy hole much more easily. You can see I'm gradually tapering it. Although a disadvantage of heating very large pieces of metal is that it takes so long, and it has to sit in a fire for a ridiculous amount of time for it to actually get hot. One of the advantages is I can afterwards forge it for longer as well, because it loses heat more slowly, since it's got less surface area, I guess. When forging a military saber as opposed to arming swords or other weapons. For a military saber, there's the basket hilt. So one of the things you need to bear in mind is making sure that it sort of fits, although there is a degree of tolerance, because you know, there's spring in the steel. But there we are, I'm testing it in the hardy hole. Yeah, just bearing in mind the sort of, you know, the basket hilt really, which will then go from the, you know, from the top around down to the bottom of the tang. But I mean, besides that, it's very similar. You've still got to forge out the tang, you've got the fittings. Instead of a crossguard, you've got a basket hilt. Like I said, there's tolerance. It's not like you need to make the basket hilt perfect size, because it can kind of spring about and it can squish in or pull out slightly with a little bit of tolerance, as long as it's roughly the right size. And then there's the factor of making it a round, you know, slightly curved blade, but that's nothing too extreme, you know, compared to all the different skills, like making fullering, forging the edge in, getting the heat treatment is extremely important, getting consistent thickness, all of those things. I've wondered if they'd start doing that, but no. Funnily enough, my neighbours have not complained yet. Let's have a look. Is it possible for the rod to expand and get stuck in a hardy hole? No. What actually happens that makes it get stuck is that I hammer it, and it sort of jams it in further. Which has happened pretty much every single time that I've used it. It's very annoying. Now, where's a good one? Here's an example. I have not edited this trying to see which ones have condensed, because otherwise you're watching me stare at things a lot. Yes, the metal contracts as it cools. I think one of the only substances in the world that doesn't contract as it cools is water, which expands, but water's weird. So here, you can actually see there's this tool thing. I don't know what it was. It was like a screwdriver at one end, and there's another end which was similar to that, but there was a little stick thing coming out the other end. You can see I sort of... Yes, it is RuneScape, you can see on my desktop. So now I forged out further, and it goes from being a round rod to being far more tapered. So then we look at the coat hooks. This was actually... So you see bits like here, unfortunately likes to defocus. So I worked well into the night finishing this off. Well, I say well into the night. Probably only until about 6 in the evening, but the sun set at about 3 in the afternoon. So it feels like night time. Oh yeah, I did some blacksmithing in RuneScape. It was nothing special. So anyway, you can see... Here we are. So I start forging it out further and further and further into a more flattened shape. And also stretching the material out so I can get more for the same amount of weight. Then we have this. Unfortunately, in this footage it's going to defocus. I've checked it. I don't know why it does this, but you can still get a rough idea. If I could forge anything, what would it be? A sword. I'll forge my own arrow tips and then fletch them and test them on my own homemade. Yeah, I might do. That's something I could try one day. I forget I sit by the heat for a long time, so I get it very hot. To make axes, mostly a forge welding. So you forge out a sort of, it's almost like a pair of tongs. So you get this sort of U-shaped lump of metal, and then you forge weld the two straight bits together, so you've got this sort of hole, you know, for the actual handle to go through. Forge weld the bits together, and then you've got it. We can stretch it out by standard hammering as you see fit into the shape of an axe head. Anyway, ready for this? The one shall become two. This is why I made the hardy tool. Bing! Like I said, unfortunately it defocused for an unknown reason, but you can see, cut off. The one became two. Yeah, I should make a spearhead at some point. The problem is making the spearhead hole. I need to figure out how to do that. But yeah, once I've done that, I can have my own spear, which would be good. If I wanted a spear, I'll just make one since I've waited so long to get one. Start on this bit. Do I make pommels? Not yet, but I will do. One of the things I can do at the moment is I can cast many materials. So I can use brass, copper, aluminium, lead, potentially gold and silver, but that requires I actually find them. Steel, not so much. You know, things like platinum, steel, and titanium, they require very hot temperatures. It would take a lot of effort and fuel to try and get those melted. As you can see, I start to taper out the material. Oh, and drop stuff a lot. Here we are, you can start to see the shape more. By this point, here you see, it's fairly flat around here, it's tapered and more sort of squared around there. And I use this, which is the Pritchell hole, which is there at the back. So I can punch that through. A button that would send me back to medieval England permanently. Would I press it? No, I would not press that button. I can have all of the advantages of the medieval period that I like here, like blacksmithing and swinging swords around and doing all of that stuff here, but yet I've got all the modern conveniences, like YouTube. So I see no reason to go back to medieval England, because I've basically got all of the advantages and none of the disadvantages. Yeah, they probably would. Here you can see me punching the hole through. I do it from both sides. It doesn't really sadden me that I'll never truly test my H.E.M.A prowess in battle, because that means I'm not going to die. Quenching the tongs again. Then I flatten it back out again. Medical times, what? Back on the Crusades. No, probably not. Here's the other one being forged out. Obviously in daylight, so you can see it better. That doesn't improve my prowess in battle. Here you can see part that will be the hook. Oops, dropping things again. It's got there where the holes are. Obviously that's rough at the moment. And there's the part where the hook will be. The samurai wins because they've got steel instead of bronze. Plus, they're the elite, whereas a Greek hoplite can be from a militia, or from a levy, who will have varying amounts of training. The samurai would have trained like a knight from sort of teenage years or childhood. You can see me trying to get rid of the forge scale, which builds up. Nasty stuff. Who wins, a knight or a samurai? It depends on the individual. It really does come back down to the individual. Because you can have one who is, you can have differing levels of training. Some would do what would be the bare minimum amount that they have to do. Others would train obsessively, including doing a variety of exercises like climbing walls and the things in full armour, as has been noted in some treatises and things. Just not to say those people were superhumans, but just that they trained a lot. They were compare them to athletes. You've got people who do certain sports or partake in certain activities more recreationally, and certain knights might not even want to ever go to war and just do it for show, whereas others train obsessively like athletes. A couple more minutes, then we'll wrap up. So we have that. You can see I'm trying to get some sort of leaf-like shape. That's a mistake. What's the item? Ah, here we are. I haven't a clear route, H.E.M.A. If I could ask a genuine knight any question, I'd probably ask their fighting style. Right, last bit of footage. Let's watch. See that, it's been tapered. So that's that. Aha! Oh, I must have forgotten to record or something. That's ridiculous. Anyway, here it is with the curl in it. I basically used the horn. I started around there. Just basically let it curl on there. Hammering it. This one is the bigger hammer, the one on the left. I struggle enough to... Cool. See, I go blacksmithing every weekend since it's, darker after working days. But, I mean, these past couple of days, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, I've had the chance to do... Okay. The channel of parenting group out at the mosque. Well, there we go. I didn't know I had a promoter. Thank you very much. But, oh yes, I've been able to do blacksmithing yesterday and today because I had, I have got Christmas Day and Boxing Day off of work, luckily. assume you're trying to level it out. Hey, there, I decided I was not happy with the amount of curve, so I actually tried to uncurl it slightly. It's almost cold forging it a bit there. There we go. But that shall be it for today. It's, well, 20 minutes past 10, and I've got work starting early tomorrow. But hopefully I should have my, even if it's not going to be called the hand-forged Christmas, because I've got Boxing Day. I think Boxing Day is when charity work would be done on the day after Christmas. As you know, the boxes of charity supplies being given to the poor, I think. Or something like that. But, well, yes, there's the... Oops, newt. Anyway, so here's the items that I actually forged many years ago. The tea light holder here, got a key ring, another key ring, the hardy tool you saw earlier, a knife, which I'd done earlier, and 2 coat hooks, as well as this tire iron candle holder, and this, which is currently just a lump of copper forged and sort of flattened out into something more smooth, but it'll have a hole drilled in it and hopefully have my mother's name put in it so it can become a pendant. So that's it for today. I hope you guys had a wonderful time, and hopefully you'll enjoy the condensed and uploaded future videos. Okay, Raucha, I'll let you have your moment. Bye-bye.